Welcome to The Disciplined Life. I'm Aria.
And I'm Coda.
We use our experience as a married couple living in a domestic discipline marriage to talk about the ups and downs of implementing authority structure and domestic discipline into modern relationships.
Let's do it. Hello, everyone.
Hey, guys. So this week is going to be a continuation of last week, where last week we talked about non-spanking punishments that we don't use. And this week we are going to be talking about the non-spanking punishments that we do use. But before we get into that, if you are not already, please do subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Give this video a like, give a comment. All of that really does help. And if you want to support the channel further, a link to our Patreon is down below. Without further ado.
Let's go.
Okay, so when coming up with this list of non-spanking punishments that we do use, it's not as extensive as the list of things that we don't use.
That's true.
And partly because, like I mentioned in the last podcast, most of our punishments are spankings. And even when we do use a non-spanking punishment, most of the time it is also paired with a spanking, just because that's what works primarily in our relationship. So if you are out there and you're like, we basically just use spanking, we don't bother with any of this other stuff, that's okay. But we do have a few reinforcements that are non-spanking that we do incorporate because they do make sense for us. And so we're going to kind of go into that. And just like last week where we categorized the type of punishment it is, we're going to kind of do that here as well. So really there's only two categories, so we're going to get into the first one. And that is?
So the punishments that are more, I guess, practical to whatever rule was violated.
Think of like, natural consequences type of outcomes. So this would be for things like if I stayed up too late the night before, or if I'm kind of grouchy because I'm tired, then an early bedtime would be in order. So that's kind of along the lines of this category. So that is one of them. What's another one that we use?
Well, so she's required to drink a certain amount of water. And if she doesn't do that, she loses the privilege of being able to have her soda during the next day, or sometimes she can lose it several days in a row.
Right. And so soda, coffee, really anything that is not water is kind of off the table if I'm not meeting that water goal.
Then she's definitely meeting it at that point.
One that we haven't really had to use but is on the table is if I fall behind on housework, or I'm just kind of lazily not getting the things done that I need to get done. If I have plans to go out for a social event, I can potentially lose the privilege to do that. Because if I'm not managing my time well at home, then I don't get to have time to have leisure social activities.
So this is one of those punishments that we haven't used, as Aria mentioned, really at all. Aria tends to be really good with her time, and so we haven't had to use this very much. But also when that has arisen, which is not very often, we haven't really had any social events to be able to use that. So we've had to use a different form of punishment. But this is still on the table. It's something that we can go to if we need to.
Yes.
So I just wanted to clarify that just a little bit more.
Yeah, like I said, not something that we've had to employ the use of, but something that is there if it ever became relevant. So trying to think through our rules, I can't think of anything else that we really use regularly or that we've really talked about that would be like a natural consequence of not following the rules.
And really what we're getting at here for many of you, and we've said this before, you may have more than us in this category. you may have just as many as us. The purpose here, though, is to make sure that you have punishments that are going to work for your relationship, and that are going to work for the rules that you've set up. But our tendency, as you probably know, is we want to be as simple as possible. We just feel like if we had too many rules, that it would be hard to enforce those. So we try to make all of our rules and all of our consequences very, very clear and very, very simple, so that we're not having to deal with a lot of them.
And practical to what I struggle with as the taken in hand partner, and practical to the goals of our family. So this isn't a struggle of mine, but if for some reason I was really struggling with the desire to make dinner, which is one of my responsibilities, if that was a struggle of mine and I was using not making dinner as a way to manipulate the situation to go get takeout regularly, then I could see Coda saying, look, not only are you going to get a spanking for not making dinner when you're supposed to, but I could see him saying, we're not getting takeout, we're going to go get frozen pizza, or we're going to go get sandwich fixings, and really take away the reward of takeout, which is my goal for not doing what I'm supposed to do, right?
And you brought up a really good point just now as well. A lot of these rules, we don't want you to think too that if they're violated over and over and over again, then they will result in a spanking. All of these are kind of starters, though. They're part of the rules that we have felt that this doesn't need to be a spanking right away. But as she brought up, depending on whether or not this becomes a habit, then it would eventually go to a spanking. And if it kept going even after spanking, the severity of that spanking would then be, it would go up that chain of all of the spankings that we have talked about. But that's not where we start. But I just want to clarify that if it's constantly violated, we don't constantly keep going back to, okay, for example, oh, you didn't drink your water, you lose your soda. She does it the next day. It's not like, oh, you lose your soda again. It's like, okay, now we're going to up the punishment a little bit.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up water, because I was going to use that as an example. I have a 40-ounce tumbler that I use throughout the day. And so my goal is to drink 3 of those a day. And so if I completely just neglect my water and I don't drink any of them, I do lose my soda, but I also get a spanking right away for that, because I completely neglected that goal.
Didn't hydrate at all. See, so there's ebbs and flows, and there's also severity depending on how much she accomplished and how much that she didn't.
And so there is room for these to stand alone, but there's also room for them to support a larger punishment situation.
Definitely.
So the next category is punishments that provoke thought. And what I mean by that is punishments that really make me think and reflect on the misbehavior, and really give me the opportunity to understand the rule better, or understand the impact of my behavior better. And so one of the things that we actually recently used was the use of a written apology for the misbehavior that I exhibited.
Yes. So in this particular scenario, obviously a rule was violated, and she did wind up getting a spanking for this as well. But I felt that also for the spanking to be effective, that I felt like she needed to really understand the severity of what she violated. So I had her sit down and write me a written apology, apologizing for what she did and explaining why she knew it was wrong. And I actually think that helped a lot in her being able to, when we got to the spanking process, when we would, in the spanking, when we have our lecture time, as we've talked about during that she was able to process it a little better. Would you agree with that?
I definitely agree. Part of the reason why you had me do the written apology is because you were sick.
I was sick, yes.
And so we had to delay the
spanking
aspect of that punishment. And so in order to not further delay the conclusion of misbehavior to consequence, you had me do the written apology with the understanding that there would be a spanking that happened once you were feeling better. And I was actually the one that brought up, like, hey, this actually really helped me understand the implications of my behavior and really understand why what I did was wrong. And so I was the one that brought up, like, hey, you might want to maybe do this more often. And I think you thought that was a good idea.
Yes, yes. It was something that after we did it, I thought, oh, this is definitely something that even if a spanking is not involved, this would be something good that I could ask for her to do, for something that might be a small violation that I think, you know what, I don't think this needs to be a spanking. And so I thought, oh, the written apology is actually something really, really good that we could go to, and I can kind of keep in my back pocket, if you will.
And when we say written apology, we're not talking about a one line, I'm sorry, I fill in
Right.
the blank. It's
Right.
really a reflection of, you know, explaining what I did, explaining why it was wrong, you, apologizing, like that's part of the art of an apology, is, but explaining how I was wrong, what I plan to do in the future, and sincerely laying out how deeply sorry I am for what I did, and explain, and just really communicating that I understand where I went wrong and I understand what I need to do in the future to avoid that misbehavior again.
I think it was, I mean, she had written like what, a couple pages?
It was one page front and
Okay.
back, and
Okay.
in my journal, and my journal is not a 8.5 by 11. I think it's like a 5 by 7
Yeah. Okay.
journal,
Yeah, that's what, yeah.
but it was front and back of that. So
And the only reason I wanted to bring that up is because you may want to have a discussion about that. If you decide that you want to use an apology as a punishment, you may want to talk about that between the both of you of the discussion of length. That might be something you want to talk about. In this case, I felt like the length was perfect, and she said what she needed to say.
I believe that the minimum length is one page, like one side of the
Oh, we
page.
had already discussed
I
it.
believe
Okay,
we
there we go.
we had kind of established some parameters during our boot camp, but this was really the first time that he's used that
Yeah,
in a
that's
long
true.
time.
Right, right.
So
Um, and yeah, so I just want to make sure that you're all having discussions about that. And again, what we have said doesn't may not work for you. You may, but talk about that before you kind of decide that you want to use a written apology as punishment. So
the next thing that we use that kind of falls into this category, and we use this pretty regularly, is writing lines.
mm-hmm.
And when we did our boot camp, we did talk a lot about non-spanking punishments that we found value in. And this was one that Coda was slightly surprised when I explained to him, like, this is something that really does work well for me. And he was a little surprised by
I
that.
was, yeah.
But the reason why it works well for me is because they have shown that there is a connection, like a brain pathway connection, that happens when you physically write with a writing implement, whether that's a pen or a pencil, on paper. It really does connect the idea in your mind in a way that is a lot more accessible. And so when I write lines, it's not that I despise writing lines. And I think that that's an important point, is for something to be a punishment, it doesn't have to necessarily be something that is a negative experience. It doesn't have to be something that is dreaded. It can be something that is just really valuable for as a learning tool. And so for me to write lines, especially the same phrase, 50 is kind of our starting point. It can go up from there, but 50 is average. And so to write the same phrase 50 times in a row, It does become cumbersome, like, at around 30 lines in, I'm just like, "I just kinda wanna get this over with," and that's kinda when, the rubber meets the road as far as, like, being dedicated to see the punishment through. Um, but it really does solidify in my mind what the expectation is. So we do try not to use negative phrases. So instead of "I will not" or uh, I I can't think of I'm thinking of the Bart Simpson in the dunce cap writing
Oh
on
yeah,
the on the
yeah.
chalkboard.
The chalkboard.
I will not be late to school.
Yeah.
We really try to avoid negative phrases like that, and we really do try to do positive phrases. So let's just use bedtime as an example instead of "I will not be late to bed." It's really um, I will honor my body's need for rest by getting to bed on time.
Yes.
And that goes further into "I will get to bed on time." That's a positive phrase. But to really like add that extra phrase of like, "I will honor my need for rest by getting to bed on time," it is creating a neural pathway in my brain that says I need to honor my physical needs by obeying the rules that we have set in place that I've agreed to. And I need to get to bed on time in order to do both of those things.
And that's exactly what I was going to say is that it may seem a little silly, but it really is a psychology thing. It's a psychological thing, and you would be surprised how that has helped Aria when she has written lines, and we've used that in a positive way where she's creating those neural pathways to tell. Because when you write something, they've shown that you really create some good neural pathways for yourself, and so what it does for her is it definitely gets her to understand why it's important, and it has made it to where she has followed through with complying to those things when she does it. And so that's why I say it may seem a little silly, but it really has a big impact. Don't underestimate how powerful it can be.
So the parameters for us for writing lines is when I sit down to write lines, I can't be watching a show. I can't have my phone on. I really need to put everything away, put all the distractions away so that I can focus on what I'm writing. I read the words as I'm writing them. Um, Now I am allowed to make it cute, make it pretty.
Yes,
Um,
she is allowed. Yep.
and so sometimes I will use different colored inks. Sometimes I'll use stickers. And it's just a way for me to kind of enjoy the process of what I'm doing. I don't have to do it all in one setting. I can break it up if I want to, but every time I sit down to do it, I do need to put everything away and really focus on what I'm writing and really focus on the lesson behind the words that I'm writing.
And some of you may have just thought now, well, wait a minute, she gets to make it pretty, she gets to put stickers on it. Is she's taking it seriously? That's something that you have to work out between the two of you. Because at first, I did kind of have a red flag moment where I'm like, wait a minute, if you're decorating this and you're putting stickers on it, is she really taking it seriously? I believe that your partner can, and that it's okay. Again, it's re-emphasizing in a positive way why they need to do something, and you'll see it in their behavior. If I thought that after she wrote it, made it look pretty and stickers and all that kind of stuff, that she didn't follow through, that she was still violating the rules, then that could be something that I could say, okay, you have to write it again. Not only going to get a spanking maybe now, and you have to rewrite it again, but you don't get to make it nice. You don't get to put stickers. You don't get to put flowers. You don't get to put any of that stuff on there because you obviously didn't mean it and you didn't take it seriously. Luckily, we have not had to have that conversation, but I would say those of you who may have gone, wait a minute, that's how she has to do it. It really helps her to really emphasize what she is trying to learn and the habits she's trying to form. But again, this may or may not work for you, so have a discussion about it.
Being able to personalize it in that way really does help me connect to the words that I'm writing and the phrases that I am writing. And the phrase is the lesson behind the punishment.
Exactly.
And so anything that helps me build a connection to that phrase and solidify it in my brain is not a bad thing.
No, and that's why I say, again, have discussions about this, because Aria is very much a kinesthetic learning type person. And so she has to write it out. She likes stickers. She likes all of those things. You all know who you are that use paper planners. Nothing wrong with that, but you're a very kinesthetic person. And so you just need to take that into account when you're thinking about maybe implementing a punishment like this.
Now, I have heard, and this is something that we do not use, but I have heard of people using, um, oh, the kneeling pads that I referenced in the last podcast. I've heard of people using those, but sitting on them while doing any type of writing to create a physical component of this punishment. I just wanted to throw that out there, that that's an option. It's not something we do, but it is an option.
It is an option.
But definitely writing lines is something that is very effective for me. And I think you've seen that.
Yeah.
And again, it's something that can stand alone. And most of the time it does for us. Like, that is one non-spanking punishment that really does stand alone most of the time, but it can be paired with a spanking if you need to kind of re-emphasize the lesson that is to be learned. One that we haven't used a lot, but it is an option, is writing a summary or a report, doing some research behind why we have some of the rules that we have. So for not drinking water, if that became a big issue, then CODA could say, I want you to write me a one-page report about the effects of dehydration on the human body. And it really can give me perspective of why it's important to him. Like, why is this a rule that has a punishment attached? Like, why is this such a big deal? And you can do that with any of your rules. Like, what is the effects of sleep deprivation, of not getting enough sleep? How does proper nutrition affect the body as opposed to not having proper nutrition? Trying to think of some other things, but because what are some of our other rules?
I was like, you really hit some of the big ones.
I was about to say, I hit kind of like the big habit-based rules that we have.
If you decide to use this, you're going to have to, again, this will be a decision between you both about how long that report is going to be. It could be a page, it could be 2 pages.
Could be 5, 10.
Could be 5, 10. Yeah, I mean, golly, if you're going to have her do an entire essay, okay. But the point being is that you really want to have a discussion about this before you do it. And yeah, we haven't really had to utilize that yet because
these other tactics work really well, and so that would kind of be like the last stop at the train station, right?
Right.
That would be kind of like, nothing else is getting through to you, woman. You need to figure this out right now. And that
so it is on the table for us, but we haven't utilized it yet because I haven't needed to. So that's a good thing.
And I don't think CODA wants to grade my homework. He has enough of his own.
I got enough of my own. Yes, exactly.
So that's kind of where our non-spanking punishments options kind of end, because like I said, I would say a good 95% of the time, if I'm getting punished, there's a spanking involved. And so we just don't utilize a whole lot of these options. But the ones that we do really do make sense for our relationship, and they really do support our relationship.
And obviously, we want to have these here so that it's not always a spanking. However, we also don't want to diminish those of you who do use spanking, because it is a very, very important and very integral part of what we do and as a part of the disciplined life. So again, we do not want to necessarily communicate, hey, instead of spanking, do this. This is just some things that we have on the table that we can also utilize. But we do utilize spanking, usually sometimes a lot more. then we do these, just because we do find that to be the most effective. So you're going to have to decide what works for you both.
And I think that it's really good to have some options just in case you are in a situation like we were in where Coda was very sick.
Yes.
He could not spank me right away. And in order to have some form of immediate consequence, he was able to pull out one of these as an option. And that can work if you're on vacation, that can work if you're visiting family, that can work if for some reason one of you is traveling for work and you don't have the physical ability to utilize spanking right away, then you can use this and follow up with a spanking later if that's appropriate, or you can utilize this instead of a spanking.
So again, just have some conversations and figure out what's going to work best for you all. The key always is to communicate and to talk things out, and to make sure that you set up a system that is really going to set you both up for success.
Yes. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. I hope we gave you some things to think about. Whether you use some of the things that we don't use from the last podcast, or you use some of the things that we do use, or vice versa, that is completely up to you. But hopefully you can think through these categories and see what works for you, because that is what it's all about, is customizing your relationship to fit your needs in a way that makes sense for you. If you want to support the channel further, get access to our Discord server, as well as bonus content, the link to our Patreon is down below, and we hope to see you there.
See you later.
Bye.